Okay, great. Thanks everyone for joining us. So today we're going to be talking about the agency rollercoaster, and we've got two great panelists. So we've got Jane Hunt from JBH and Harry Sanders from Studio Hawk. So yeah, both have fascinating stories, backgrounds, and we want to keep this kind of like open and honest in terms of there's great sides of running an agency, there's not so great sides of running an agency, and we want to give you the true picture and yeah, kind of show you both sides of that world. So yeah, thanks very much both of you for joining us and yeah, putting time into this. And yeah, Jane, do you mind starting by just doing a quick intro in terms of yeah, kind of who you are, and then I know we've got a couple of slides, we can move into that afterwards, but yeah, it'd be good to obviously do a quick intro and then we'll go from there.
Sure, okay. Thanks, Kevin. So yeah, I'm Jane Hunt. I'm the CEO and co-founder of JBH. JBH is a specialist digital PR and SEO agency, and we've been going for 10 and a half years now. So for a while, and we've had quite an organic journey, which I'll go into in more detail. But we have made some critical decisions that's changed the course of the agency. But as I say, we're a specialist digital PR agency, so we're very niche. And yeah, I'll talk more about that in a bit.
Great, perfect. Thanks, Jane. And Harry, are you able to do the same?
Yeah, so my name's Harry Sanders. I'm the founder of Studio Hawk, so predominantly in Australia, but we've expanded into the UK and we're in the midst of expansion to the US. So we're, yeah, just SEO only. Just started doing some digital PR as well, but that's the business.
Great, perfect. Okay, I'm just going to present the slides, and then we've got a bit more background we can go into on each of us, and then take it from there. So perfect. Okay, so the first one is I'll give you some background because I realise not everyone will necessarily know who I am. So I'm Kevin Gibbons. I'm the founder at Resignal. So we're a specialist SEO agency, fully remote in the UK. I've been doing this since 2006. Some of those photos are very old now, probably about 15 years ago. And I've actually ran two agencies. The first one was SEO Optimize in Oxfordshire, which is where I'm from, and now Resignal. And if you map out our revenue, certainly this is just from the Resignal time, it does look like a roller coaster. And yeah, obviously that's the topic for today, but there's ups and downs all of the time. Even if this was a straight line, if you looked into that granularly, I mean, this week has had quite a lot of ups and downs. Most weeks have quite a lot of ups and downs. That's kind of how it works. And yeah, I think it'll be interesting to dig into a bit more detail about what causes that, what you can do about it. Sometimes you can't, and just how do you actually just control how you're feeling about it in some cases, and yeah, kind of then take it forward. But yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting journey. So yeah, Jane, would you like to do the same in terms of just a
Yeah,
bit of your
sure. So
background?
I feel like I've put a bit of a mood board together by
Yeah,
accident,
great.
but I think it was just to kind of show like the key moments of the journey of JBH. So obviously, top left, you've got myself and my co-founders when we set up in 2013, looking young and full of energy. And I've included some digital PR coverage below, because it's fundamental in kind of changing the course of our agency. So when we set up JBH as an agency, we set up as a content marketing agency, and we literally did absolutely everything under the sun. And it was okay for a bit, and then it just became really tiring. So at one stage, about 6 years ago, we decided that we would just focus on digital PR. And that's when we brought Rebecca in, kind of in the middle there, to be our digital PR manager. We moved the whole agency from Northampton to Manchester to take advantage of all the talent there. And during COVID, we set up the Missing Link webinar, which I will talk about in more detail in a bit. And there in the background, you can see our office in Manchester, which oddly or kind of profoundly used to be the old Express newspaper building as well. So that's where we are today. And then we've got our team below that, where we celebrated our 10th birthday back in September. And then we also have Andy Holland in here, who you might recognize. And we set up a SEO team or service last year. So Andy came in to obviously head that up. And that kind of brings us up to today, really.
Perfect. That's great.
And I thought I'd show you kind of what our revenue graph looks like. Like Kevin, it's not obviously been a straight line upwards, but where you can see it really go downhill is where we changed from being a content agency to a digital PR agency. So overnight we had to end a lot of projects, so we lost revenue, and then we had to make up for it really quickly. And then ever since, it's been kind of a nice kind of organic upward kind of line. And then the top bit is kind of last year or so, where it's got a little bit more tricky and a bit rocky as well. But yeah, again, I can discuss more about that in a bit.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Perfect. And then Harry, I think you might need to present your slides
Sure.
from your browser and then go from there.
No worries. I'll get that working now. So yeah, my journey's fairly similar. I mean, I started the world of SEO from kind of RuneScape, which is, I think, a pretty good fun way to start. So just kind of learning about the world of digital. Animation, I didn't know about that. Started Studio Hawk after working for full service agencies for a while. Had a really, really rough period when I started the business. I actually, thought the whole business was going to collapse. I ended up homeless. And that's a whole journey that we might go into later. And then over the next few years, kind of built up that first million. Now, this graph, I got a disclaimer. This is yearly, right? If you look at this monthly, I mean, it is very similar to the other graphs you've seen, but I didn't get the yearly figures, the monthly figures. I just got the yearly one. So it makes it look really good, but the reality of that is a lot bumpier. So, but yeah, so we hit that first million. It took us years. That's kind of what I illustrated here. Like we went from 2015, like what, 5.5 years before we hit that kind of first million. But then you can kind of see after we hit that, we really kind of took off. So yeah, we started in Melbourne in Australia, which we've now got about 60 staff, which is crazy to think about. Then we expanded to Sydney, where we got about 10 staff, London, where we got about 12 staff, and now we're in the midst of expanding that into the US as well. So it's been a wild ride in terms of expanding into new markets and hiring and growing accounts and learning London, learning the Sydney market, all those different fun things. So you can see Anthony is a bit of old photos. I couldn't find anything too new. In the top left there, who leads the London team, and then Lawrence in the bottom left there, who leads the Australian team. So kind of going from that 1 million to 10 million, that ongoing journey. And then I just threw this one as a nice photo when I was able to buy my mum a house because she didn't have one. So that's just kind of some of the nice things that an agency or, what we do kind of lets us provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the graph because everyone wants an overnight success, right? And the reality is most things worth having are hard work, and
That's
it's
it.
not always kind of feeling like it's moving forward at every point in time as well. So yeah. Also, we should probably say you are joining us. Are you in Melbourne right now? No, you're in Australia.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm in Melbourne, Australia.
So was it 1 a.m.?
1 a.m.
Nice. Yeah. I feel like my brain doesn't work after about 3 p.m. in the UK. So it's quite impressive that you're still going, honestly. So I think in terms of like starting this, I actually want to start at the start. So kind of like describing what that was like and like why you got into this in the first place and what those early days were like. So yeah, Jane, are you okay to maybe just give us a bit of a background about where the original idea from an agency come from and kind of how you got going?
Yeah, so I like to think it was accidental. And I don't know whether you can accidentally start an agency, but I feel like because there wasn't a long-term plan for this, and it was quite quick. It was more accidental than it was kind of, a long-term plan. So I happened to be working at another agency in Northampton, and I worked there with my current co-founders. And then I was really unhappy there. It was a horrible place. And after a couple of years, I just walked out one day. I just had enough. And Aaron and Andy, who are my co-founders, they'd already left. Andy had been traveling. Aaron was doing freelance work. So we all just kind of came back together, did some freelance work for one of our clients that used to work at the other agency. And then we just kind of discussed the idea of taking that a bit further and just turning it into an agency. And the client we were working for at the time was like, yeah, you should do it. I'll give you plenty of work, and that gave us a bit of confidence and a kind of reason to do it, I guess. And I also had a mortgage to pay and I needed to do something. So it just seemed like, the best option at the time. And it was incredibly exciting, but it was very new, obviously, because we never planned for this. Like, I hadn't been planning this for years or anything. So we literally put it together in a few months, and just thought we'd see what happened. And then we didn't have any kind of big expectations in terms of turnover or anything like that. Like, for the first year, it was just about covering our costs. And if we took a salary, then that was like added value kind of thing. So, expectations were quite low for the first few years.
I think that's great though. And like in terms of the journey, I think at a certain stage you probably do need a business plan. I don't think that's necessarily day one, certainly in terms of like the depth of where are you going, how are you going to get there. It's kind of because you'd rip it up within a week because so much changes and you don't know what you're doing. I've often said there's a beauty in the naivety of when you get started, because if I knew everything that I know now in terms of what I'd have known back then to get started, I might not have done it. I probably wouldn't have done it because it's like, oh, that's overwhelming. Like, I can't do all of that. But the reality is, it's like you just learn things over the years, right? And you just have to, like, none of us, I'm sure, got into this to understand about HR, finance, all of the other stuff that you have to pick up along the way. But you have to pick it up along the way. So yeah, no, I think that's a really good background, and definitely in terms of what you're doing, it's like I think the lesson there is just start, figure it out. It might work, it might not work, but yeah, no, I think that's great. Harry, how about you? You mentioned you were working similarly in an agency beforehand.
Yeah, similar story to Jane. So kind of working at a full service agency, kind of doing everything. I was 14 when I started there, 17 when I finished up, which is one of those things, at the time you just think this is super normal, and then looking back, can you imagine, Kevin, you hired some 14-year-old kid to come work part-time in the business? I just think it's the funniest thing. I'm just like, man, they must have really been desperate. Anyway, but so worked there, and then similar to Jane, had no plan. Kind of started a business. Called it Studio Hawk because I was just like, well, we're never going to be bigger than like a little studio, and studio was like one person, because I was like, call it Studio Hawk. At least it sounds a bit more professional than just you're dealing with me. And yeah, it just kind of, certainly didn't take off at the start. I went through a bit of a personal journey, but then it started kind of gradually growing and very organically kind of taking off, and kind of accelerating along that way, going through similar periods of business. You go from like when it's just you, to when it's 5 people, to when it's 20 people, to when it's 50 people, to when it's, we're coming up to that 100 people now. And it's like I've had 5 different versions of this business. It's just so interesting to look back on. I remember we were 5 people and we're just like celebrating that no one's ever left the business. And now I look back at that and I laugh. It's like, of course we're celebrating that. We're 5 people. It's just not how things work. But yeah, that's kind of how I got in. I didn't really have a plan. I never thought it would be anywhere near where it is now. And I've always just had the mindset of continuous growth, and learning is just kind of what's going to get us there.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's, yeah, kind of how do you deliver quality to your clients? And then how do you keep doing that at different scales and different levels? And those clients will get bigger over time. And
Hmm.
they're not the type of clients that you could win on day one, but you
Definitely.
learn different ways, you build experience, you build case studies, and it all goes from there. I mean, I actually got started in a similar way. I did a web design agency placement, and this was 2003. Probably showing my age a bit now, but I then did the typical UK student like gap year thing, and I went to Australia for a year. So
There you go.
in 2006. My plan was to do some freelance work. I didn't even quite know what that meant at the time. I actually tried to look for agencies that would offer SEO as a service in Australia, and they didn't know what SEO was back in 2006. And I also then realised that if you have a professional job on a working visa, you have to change job every 3 months. So even if I could do it, it would have been no good. So I went freelance in Australia, worked with clients in the UK. They just thought I worked crazy hours, a bit like you do, Harry. And and it just seemed to work. Like back then, the clients were small enough that I could use Skype back in the day. But generally, most things were over email. And I never considered myself an entrepreneur, an agency owner. I was just paying the bills. And if I've got enough money that I don't come home completely broke, then I'm okay with that. And then, kind of started from there and build it up. But yeah, I do think if I wasn't in Australia, or if I put the pressure on myself, I know people later in life with mortgages and kids and everything else where it's like they'd love to do it, they'd be great at doing it, but at that stage you've got to be sensible. And I think both of you have mentioned you don't always take a salary from this, you
Yeah.
cover your costs. I've certainly had months, and probably up until a decent amount of time, never been the highest paid person in the company, and you're always kind of trying to bring in talent. Some months you make a loss, some months you don't have the cash flow to pay yourself and you have to sit on it. Like there's that side of things that I think over time hopefully that gets better. But yeah, there's certainly sacrifices. I know, Harry, you mentioned briefly, I know there's a much more of a story here, but you were homeless at a certain point in time, and again it's like that's I can't even imagine in terms of what that must have felt like. But yeah, I mean, can you talk us through that a little bit in terms of, it sounds like that was in the early days of starting an agency. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was about 9 years ago now, so a while back. But
Yeah.
I started the agency. Well, kind of spent all my money on like kind of the incorporation, the business, accounting, all the fun stuff that you have to do there. Was kind of thinking, hey, how hard is it going to be to get some clients? I never had to do pitches for business before. I realized the old company was charging, $200 an hour. I'm like, dude, this is easy. I'll just charge like half that and I'll have more work than I know what to do with. And I couldn't be further from the truth on that one. So as this all kind of happened, and I left on pretty bad terms with my old job, which I really still regret to this day, because they gave me an opportunity and let me kind of hone my skills. But anyway, I left that, and very common story, unfortunately. My mum was also homeless, going through some stuff, and my dad's partner decided that I was baggage from his old relationship and that I was no longer welcome to stay. So I ended up on the streets of Melbourne, couch surfing in homeless camps for about 9-10 months. Um, and it wasn't until I met a social worker called Carly who really helped me focus back on the business, because to be honest, I'd given up at that point. And another mentor that's still on my board today, a man called Graham Robertson, who taught me everything about business, because while I might have been very good at SEO, or at least I thought I was, Graham taught me about business, because I really had no understanding of taxes. It came from a very poor family, so I didn't understand anything about money or anything really worthwhile. Learning about HR, learning about all these different concepts. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a condensed version of it. But yeah, so now I'm an ambassador for a youth homelessness charity back here in Australia called the Lighthouse Foundation. We do a lot of work. We donate a lot of money with them. But yeah, it's a big part of why I talk about that, because it's not a super easy journey for everyone, and there's a lot of stigma around homelessness.
Yeah, and full credit to you for coming the other side of that. And like I say, kind of, yeah, I'm sure you're an inspiration to a lot of people in terms of that story and that background. So yeah, no, it's again, it's like it's never good to hear stuff like that, but equally, I think what you've come from is certainly, I'm sure it's given you a lot of grit, determination, just a sense of what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say if anyone is joining us and wants to leave a comment or a question, then let me know and I can put it forward to the panelists. And yeah, I want to kind of fast track a little bit in terms of you've got things off the ground. Let's assume things are going well at this point in time, say maybe 2 or 3 years in. I always quite like the Dunning-Kruger chart. Speaking of charts we had earlier, but Dunning-Kruger being the one where it's kind of, I know everything, I'm a genius. and then it just drops off a cliff of like, I know nothing. And then you kind of start to build back up that level of competency again, where you've then, yeah, the naivety, like I say at the start, is great. So this is easy. I'm enjoying this. And then, yeah, there's a reality check somewhere in the middle. But I think in terms of what that looked like in the early days, certainly it would be interesting to hear what that looks like, and then maybe where the challenges started to come from. So yeah, Jane, where did you see, like, how would you describe maybe like year 2, 3, and then by that point, did it get harder?
I seem to remember years 2 and 3 as being good years, and
Right.
relatively easy years compared to, some of the later years. But I think it was just because we were a lot smaller and there were less problems in that respect, or there were different problems.
Yeah.
And as you grow, the challenges can become bigger, and yeah, it just everything becomes a much bigger problem. And then as you grow your revenue, you've got more responsibility in terms of the number of people you have and payroll and all those kind of things. And so, yeah, I look back with fond memories on years 2 and 3 that we were going off to do nice pitches. And then, a year or two later, we were winning awards and things. And wasn't life amazing? And then reality kind of set in a bit more, I think, at like year 5.
Yeah. I remember my year 1 being Australia was 2006. Year 1 proper of having an agency was 2007. And then year 2 was the financial crisis, 2008. But because we were so small, that's fine. Like, the only way is up. It didn't really matter. So we kind of like grew through that period and just enjoyed it. And then when it ended, it was like, oh, this is easier. And like you say, like, the reality check did come in further down the line in terms of, all right, it's not always easy. But the early days of building something, I think that's really fun. And I know I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs. I went to a dinner years ago with Sinclair Beecham, who's the founder of Pret, and he was very open and honest and spoke about, he missed the days of they had a sandwich van and then they turned it into a shop. And it's like now, I don't even know how many Prets there are, but it's like a global organization. And he was describing going into board meetings as not being as enjoyable as trying to make a sandwich in the morning and selling it in the afternoon. Now you have to wait 6 months to get it on the menu, and it's like, it's a different beast. So it doesn't matter if it's an agency or another type of business. The bigger that scale, like you say, Jane, it's the more you have to think about that you wouldn't have considered before. Yeah, Harry, how was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, those first few years, right? They're like your little ragtag crew. You got no real downside. I don't know. It's just it's very funny being a small agency because you definitely have a lot of Dunning-Kruger. I had to share
Yeah.
a stupid funny story. I mean, when we were 5 people or something, maybe 6 people, we hired our now current head of SEO, Charbel. But when we hired him and interviewed him, we were really sus on Sharps, and we often joke internally about this because we were just sus. The questions he asked, the background he had, he kind of felt like he was a spy or something. So we thought that Charbel was kind of sent from some agency as a spy to figure out what we were doing. And I just think that is the funniest thing to look back on. Imagine, for all of us, Kevin, Jane, to think that like there's a 5-person agency, you're going to find some kind of spy to send in and learn about how they do stuff. I mean, we are just figuring out day to day how we produce. It really is a trifecta. It's like, how do you keep your staff happy? How do you have great retention? How do you get new sales coming in? They're the 3 things we're thinking about every day. Not how do I set a spy into this no-name 5-person agency with this 21-year-old at the helm.
Yeah.
So I think those early days were naive, and I remember we would brag about our retention and stuff, which was great. But when you're only a few years in, your longest client's been with you for a few years. So it's a lot easier to retain clients when, they're all relatively new. But then when you grow, you've had clients for 5 years, marketing managers move around on that kind of 2 to 3 year cycle. And it's just, you see how things change. So I don't know. I think like everyone, you always look back on those fond years when you didn't have to do an SOP or roll something through a learning and development specialist, or tell the head of operations, to tell the team leaders, to tell their team members to do this. It was just very different. You would stand up at your desk and be like, guys, we're doing proposals like this now. Not like running town hall sessions and educations and running it through the different levels of the organization, like exactly like that Pret story. I love both versions, but I feel like every entrepreneur is going to gravitate towards breaking shit on Tuesday and fixing it on Wednesday, rather than the whole process of trying to prevent that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think I'm certainly optimistic by nature. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are, and you have to be. But yeah, you're right. There's a level where it's okay, we need to factor in some realism, and there's going to be some churn here. And I'm always like, if we've got 3 pitches, I know the realistic answer is if we've won 1 in 3, we're probably doing quite well. But equally, the opportunistic side of me is like, we're going to win all 3 of these. Of course we are. But I think you kind of need that to go into it, but you also need the bit of a reality check behind, okay, well, we might not retain 100% of our team this year. We might not retain 100% of our clients this year. We might not win every single pitch that we go for this year. And in fact, we won't, because that's life. So yeah, but it's almost like a hard thing, I think, for an entrepreneur to get their head around. It's like, what do you mean that might not work the way we want it to? So, yeah, I feel like we don't like taking no for an answer, right? So it's trying to get your head around that. But equally, I think that optimism for me is helpful as long as it's kind of channeled in the right way. Of you can't get too down about things either, or you can for a bit. If you've lost a big pitch or something, then sure, you want to feel bad about it, but equally feel bad about it for a morning, not a month. And you've got to move on. So yeah, I don't know. I do feel like it's almost, as you get deeper into that journey, it is like managing your own emotions and how you feel about it, I think is crucial. Otherwise, like Harry's chart at the start, the kind of plateau, flatline and like ours would have been similar in the early days. You might lose interest. You might just feel disheartened. Oh, this is never going to be anything more than what we are today. But yeah, it's that attitude of keep plugging away. And yeah, I don't know if either of you happy. I'm sure you both got stories of that, but like in terms of like your own experience of when you've had to almost give yourself a bit of a pep talk, I guess, and go again. Sure, there's lots of opportunity. Like I say, feel like I need to do that every week.
I was going to say, I feel like it's weekly at the moment. I feel like, I mean, I think a lot of agencies are experiencing this at the moment, and without going into too much detail about, you know, we all know we're experiencing it, but I think it's so turbulent at the moment that your expectations of things might be here and then they come in somewhere down here.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to get your head around. I think especially if you've had a good period of growth and suddenly it's like that all the time, and you've got sales targets and you're like, well, hang on, look what's going on over here. You're giving me this target, and yeah, you've got to keep that optimism, and you've got to keep your own morale up so you can keep your team's morale up. And I find that really challenging because, you know, it starts with you, and if your mindset's not in the right place, then no one else is going to be either. So like you say, I'm having like weekly chats with myself where I'm like, you know, okay, this has happened, now you have to pick yourself back up again. This isn't easy, it was never going to be easy. What are you going to do about it? And, you know, get yourself back in that fight, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's a tricky balance of like, you don't want to hide stuff from your team. I found I've had positive reactions before when I've been transparent with the team about this really hasn't gone the way we want it to. Let's all club together and fix it. And that's actually, I think they've really appreciated my honesty in those situations. But equally, if you go in feeling very downbeat about stuff in front of the whole team, it's not the type of message that you want to get across. So you have to be careful in, okay, well, this hasn't gone to plan, but here's what we're going to do about it. We're going to get through this. Here's how, or like just maybe again club together. But you need that level of optimism that is very much kind of can-do attitude.
And that comes back to leadership at the end of the day, isn't it? And I think I've learned the hard way the difference between management and then becoming a leader along the way. Because I think when you first start an agency, you can very much just be a manager, and then you get bigger, and then you've got to start leading, especially when you have challenges and stuff. And, you know, that's been a real shift for me. And I've looked back on a lot of kind of things I've done and be like, well, I shouldn't have done it like that. I can see where I went wrong, you know, and it's not to say I'm doing everything perfectly now, because I'm still making mistakes, but I've got much more self-awareness about how what I do impacts everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I've definitely gone through a journey where I probably considered myself, certainly for the early days, the best person in the business at new business, at working on terms of client delivery, at client services, probably even finance. And now it's like, I'm probably nowhere near the best person in the company at any of those anymore. But that's great, because then it's how do you create people who have that subject matter expertise in those areas? Otherwise, you're just spreading yourself too thin and you're only as good as yourself. And I think, trying to, like you say, go down the leadership track and actually create leaders yourself within the organization. How do people come up with strategies and ideas that hopefully are better than yours, and certainly they'll have more time than if you were to spread yourself too thin? And that's absolutely crucial. And Harry, from your experience, kind of what are the big lessons there for you?
I mean, similar. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I've never been, as my general manager would say, I'm not a good actor. And, I would say I'm not a very good manager. I'm a better leader. That's why I have a really good team that do the management. I'm not good at going through the KPIs or like, hey, Kevin, we hit this, but we should have hit this, I'm better at the kind of leadership. Like, we need to get into London. We need to get into the US. This is why we need to do this. We don't need to get fired up about this. But it's like being a coach, right? It's like when you are killing it, you've kind of got to realign everyone and be like, guys, we are not the best. Don't go patting yourself on the back yet. Like, we've still got a long way to go. And when you are not killing it, when it's all going to shit, you've kind of come in and go, guys, just take a bigger look at like the big picture of where we've come from, where we are, where we're going to continue to go. I know things are going to we're going to end up here. This is a projection. And I mean, sometimes it just crazy things happen. But if you go in front of the team and you say, things are just going to get worse, and I'm not actually sure how we're going to rebound. I'm not sure what the future of this industry looks like. things are definitely gonna get worse because you're gonna get a ton of resignations,
Yeah, you get a mass
people
walkout.
moving on. Yeah, so it's like you've kind of got to, you know, give everyone that frame of reference of where things are going. Because again, if you're not confident, I mean, it's like we always talk about it, like the business being a ship. Your captain comes out and goes, "Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie, things are pretty grim right now. We might hit this iceberg, we might not. I'm not sure." You're gonna be freaking out, right? You're not gonna be focused on anything else. Where sometimes you got to come out and be like, "Guys, there is a minor little chance, little tiny little itsy bitsy chance we hit this iceberg, but I have it on good faith, and I'm very, very certain that we're not going to hit that iceberg, and this is what we're going to do instead. And even if we did hit that iceberg, we've got a plan."
Yeah. I think that's exactly it. And I think the easy part is when things are going well. I feel like anyone can be a leader
Yeah.
when you're
Yeah,
just giving people good
100%.
news and a pat on the back. That's great. But when you've got to deliver hard news and there's no right answer to anything at that point in time, that's a thankless task. And I think there's certainly like learnings for me as an agency leader is starting to think about second order consequences and stuff of when you're trying to, like, in the early days of, like you mentioned before, Harry, 5 people, I would just try and manage people. It's like, just do the right thing. That's fine. That's easy. But when there's 5 people, you can do that. When it's 20 plus, then it's kind of, okay, well, you do the right thing by that person, but that actually doesn't make sense to someone else. And then it's like, you've got much more things to consider. And I think going back to your point around, kind of just when it's tough, I've always said, I don't know if this is a positive or a negative. It's just how my brain works, but I'm always most worried when everything's going well. I feel like if there's moments where, I mean, we've had moments before. We had the start of a year. I think it was before that dip. The dip looked like it's 2020, but it's actually 2019. So I went through a divorce. I went through a share buyback. We lost our 3 biggest clients within the space of about 3 months. And if I'm honest, if I look back now, we might not have had a business. I think I was very much focused on not even thinking about that. I was, okay, well, what do we need to do to turn a corner? How do we win the next client? How do we make sure that our now new biggest client, that's maybe our 4th biggest client beforehand, is in a great position and we're getting great results? How do we market ourselves and build a reputation and get your heads down and do stuff like that? And I'd be wrong to say I love that, but I do kind of thrive on proving people wrong a little bit and just say, okay, well, we're going to turn a corner and we're going to get this done and we're going to come out positively from a tricky situation. And for me, that's much more difficult. And like I say, I think sometimes when everything's going well, that's where I'd probably, maybe I ease off a bit too much and take my foot off the gas and it's kind of like lead people to it. But at the same time, I know that in times like that, most things are fixable. Sometimes not everything is fixable. And if something else goes wrong next, it's a whole house of cards situation. But I don't know how you two deal with stuff like that in terms of, kind of when times are hard to pick yourself back up again. I don't know if you've got any examples of maybe when that's been tricky for you.
Yeah, I've probably got a couple. I think right now is kind of a good example. I think it's so volatile at the moment, and I feel like there's so much pressure on brands in order to be able to kind of show the value of what they're doing and things. I think it's making it really challenging for a lot of agencies out there. And so that's a different challenge to one we've had before, to be honest. So we're trying to kind of navigate that internally, and we've always tried to kind of showcase or make sure we're kind of doing our best to show the value of everything we do, kind of beyond just the kind of traditional kind of KPIs and stuff. So that's very challenging. Having said that, I do like a challenge, and I think that's part of the entrepreneurial spirit. And there's a great book called Driven, which you both might have read, but it's all I won't go into too much detail because it'd be like another hour. But it's all about kind of the I think your DNA and what kind of, having some specific DNA that lends you more to being an entrepreneur and taking risks and things like that. Anyway, it's a really good book. I recommend it. But I think so. I kind of like a challenge, but what I don't like is where everything's going wrong at the same time, because then you feel like you're completely out of control. And where do you start?
So true.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
no, definitely resonate with that. Harry, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's always what did I say to Lawrence the other day? I hate change, but I'm very good at it. Is how I would describe it. Like, I don't like when everything's changing and turbulent and different structures are happening, but by the same token, I'm very good at, one of my superpowers is adapting to change and kind of rolling with it and figuring it out. So yeah, I'm similar to you, Kevin, when it's like when everything's good, I'm kind of stressing because I'm like, well, there's gonna be a meteor, like surely. I just haven't had the kind of life where when everything's good, you're just like things are gonna keep being good. I just don't think like that. I'm like, if everything's good, there must be something really bad's about to happen. So I start bunkering up, going through everything, and that's just my nature too, I think. But yeah, going through the kind of swings and flow of business. I mean, we've had many hits, key staff members leaving that you just thought would never leave in the early days when you don't have a succession plan. People starting their own agency to compete with you. Just all sorts of stuff. I mean, the business world's messy, and you never really hear the full truth or story behind things. I mean, we've all got, I'd love to chat to you guys offline about particular staff stories and things that have happened there where you've had, you've really gone above and beyond for a staff member, and they've turned around and basically told you to shove it and totally
Yeah,
screwed you over. And that's the business. That's the game. These things happen. Bad things happen all the time. You just got to fix them, adapt, move on. Whether it's clients leaving, staff leaving, losing pitches, yeah, it's all the name of the game. As much as it feels like you're taking 4 steps backwards, sometimes you just got to make sure you're taking 5 steps forward. And some days it really comes down to just putting one foot in front of the other. Like just
It's
get
just
up,
getting through the day.
100%, Jane. It is literally just get up, show up,
Yeah.
put one foot in front of the other,
Yeah.
walk through the coals, whatever it is, because not every day is a fun day.
yeah. I think it is learning that failure is part of success, right? They're not polar opposites, but
Yeah,
it's a hard one to take. And I
It
know what
is.
you mean. Yeah, it's just trying to figure out like when things happen, like you mentioned, like you want everyone, if there's clients that have left, you want them to leave on good terms. If there's employees that have left, you
yeah,
want them to leave on good terms. Sometimes you might feel they have and they don't feel otherwise
yeah.
or whatever. And there's all sorts of things that, again, I think for me, the answer is just not to dwell on it and just move
Mm,
on, really, because
And not
otherwise,
having time to dwell on it is useful too.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. I don't
Yeah,
think
you
we
just got to
do.
get on with it.
As founders, you kind of
Yeah.
can't really. You haven't got that time. You've got to
Yeah.
focus on what's most important to the business. So yeah, I think that's yeah, maybe that's a luxury or a positive in some cases if you just have to get on with it. Yeah. One question's come in. I think I know the answer to this for both of you, but Hans has asked, did you take any investors' money?
Geez. We didn't, yeah. When I started, I don't know anyone that would have been bold enough to invest in some 17-year-old kid's idea that was, I think it would have been a stupid investment, to be frank. I mean, it would have worked out, but it would have worked out because it was lucky, not because it was a good investment.
Yeah.
As we've expanded, no, we've always bootstrapped because I'm a bit of a control freak, admittedly. I like to have, I've seen agencies where they've got um, a lot of different investors, a lot of different stakeholders, and that's definitely one path of growing. The problem is they're going to be very focused on your profitability. They're not going to be so understanding of, hey, we need to invest in this, or we need to invest in this L&D role. It's going to cost us 100K. It's non-billable, but it's going to build us out in the next year. So we've got a really strong knowledge base. Because how do you quantify that to an investor? but we know as an agency, our agency is our people. So those kind of things. In the US market, in the UK, we didn't take any investment either. We self-invested. In the US, it's a little bit more interesting. There are some massive agencies that are interested in partnering or working with us, but we don't have the capital, especially with the US dollar, man. I don't know what the hell happened there, but damn, that is whatever happened is just insane. And so for us to get the working capital of 5 million USD to acquire like a mid-sized business there is exorbitant. So that's where we might go on a journey in getting capital there, like part raising, part funding. But I guess that's very different because when we started, we would have had such unfavorable terms versus where we are now, 10 million, in Australia, I don't know what our global performance is, maybe 13 million. We've got a good balance sheet. We've got trading history. We can negotiate those terms. But when we started, getting investment would have sucked.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's certainly in terms of getting started. I think you're an agency that should operate, in my mind, in terms of like being self-funded, and maybe there's some exceptions to that. But I think as a general rule, using investment to then accelerate and get to the next level at a certain stage is sensible. Obviously, when you win bigger clients, that may seem exciting and that may increase your revenue, but also some of them are on longer payment terms and cycles, that the cash flow gets worse, not better. And in those cases, then once you've faced that level, you might need some sort of, at least an overdraft or something like that, if not investment. But in general, agencies are cash flow positive. You should be able to reinvest into that. But there might be a stage where to get to that next level, you need, certainly if you're acquiring a company, for example, or developing tech software or those type of things, then that might be where you look for how do you make sure that the agency isn't too stretched in being able to take on that level of investment. Jane, I assume it's a similar story for yourself?
It is, yeah. No, we've never taken any investment. We've always done things organically, and that's probably a positive and a negative. And I do wonder where we might be as an agency if we had taken investment, and whether we'd be much bigger by now, whether we'd have more of a global kind of audience in that respect. But also, I don't know whether I'd want that additional pressure. Like it's challenging enough as it is without kind of adding another layer of pressure above kind of your board and having to answer to another set of people on why you haven't hit X target and why you're not making X profit, and then having to make redundancies because you're not, where you said you might be if you took the money, etc. So I think there's pros and cons to it always, but I do admire those agencies that do it and then they flourish because of it. So and it's something that we're definitely open to in the future. We're also looking at the potential of acquiring other businesses as well, however we make that investment. So there's definitely options for the future.
I think that's right. I think it's build a good business first and foremost, but there's certainly a place for it in terms of scaling. And I guess
sorry, I was just going to say, and I think there's something nice about being able to say you've done it yourself without investment, and that's quite cool.
I totally agree. I think if you're kind of starting with investment, unless you're Sir Martin Sorrell, it's kind of like, it's a bit, I mean, he has a track record quite clearly, but I think it proves that you can do it, and then you can then take it to the next level. I think a lot of agency founders are probably in a similar boat where they may be acquired themselves at some point in time, and at that point that may change the game in terms of, obviously you lose control, but you have investment and can use that to get to the next stage. And that's probably the more natural evolution of how things work with independent agencies. But again, if there's opportunities out there like you, Jane, I feel like there's probably stuff in the past that we've left on the table that I wonder what could have been.
I like to say that I'm always open for a conversation about anything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the right way to do it. One other question I have is, in terms of, if you were to look back, what do you think your proudest moment has been? And yeah, maybe start with you, Jane.
I think it's hard to put a moment on it. I think I'm not very good at celebrating moments. I think you have wins. You win awards. This happens, and then you forget, or you don't have the time to celebrate things properly.
Yeah.
But I think a couple of years after we moved the business to Manchester and set up the digital PR service, we won kind of agency of the year for PR moments. And that was really nice because it was kind of, it made me think we've made it in terms of people recognize that we're, a really good digital PR agency, we're doing well, and that's what I wanted for us. So when we went from a content agency to a digital PR agency, I wanted us to be recognized for being experts in one thing.
Yeah, that's great.
And I feel like when that happened, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve. People know us as like the digital PR agency, and that's kind of really exciting and really rewarding.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like the big moments can sneak up on you if it's gradual, and they're like almost like micro moments, if that's even the right word. But it's you've done a good job in a pitch. You feel like you might win. You then get a bit of encouragement, and then further down the line, a couple of weeks later, you've got a signed contract. But it's not like that one big moment. It's
Exactly.
and the same with awards and stuff like that. If like without sounding cheesy and saying it's about the journey, not the destination, but at the same time, it kind of is. Of like, it's what builds you up to that point. I certainly find more pride in looking back rather than saying, "Oh, today was an amazing day. I was really proud of whatever had happened on that given day." I think it's definitely like, okay, well, if I look back 5 years of where we were then versus where we are now, then that's something where you start to appreciate and kind of like grateful for where we've come from and what we've done during that time. Harry, how about you? Because you've gone through a hell of a journey. So are there specific moments, or is it kind of a similar story?
Specific moments, similar to you guys. I think it's funny listening along, and we all suck at celebrating. When we succeed. An award comes in, and you're like, "Yeah, this is sick," and then the next day, it's back to business as usual. I mean, it's amazing how fast we forget the amazing things, and then ponder on, a client leaves a bad review or something. You're like, could we have done something different? How could we have, and you just sit there in anguish, and then one good thing happens, and you're like, yeah, it's great that we won best agency in APAC. Anyway, let's go back to what else we need to do. I don't know. I think all my favorite moments, again, like reflection points when I look at where Anthony is now and how he's leading the charge over in the UK, and just how far he's come, and in his personal life, what he's been able to achieve. Same with Lawrence. I mean, those are the moments you look back and you're like, we've got something pretty special going on here. We're creating some really special opportunities and moments in people's lives, which I think is amazing. And then key moments, I think, the one I always think of is when, buying mum a house, having the money to be able to, get mum a permanent place, is always going to be up there. And I'd be concerned if it wasn't. Just one of those moments where, having the agency and the as much as there's bad times as there's good times, and that was certainly one of them. So, I mean, just those moments that make it all worth it. I honestly wouldn't say it's any big pitch we've won or anything like that. It's more like you said, Kevin, the, accumulation of all these little micro moments.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I completely agree with you in terms of seeing people grow and seeing the opportunities, whether they stay with your team or go elsewhere, but seeing people who have developed. And again, like, I won't ever take credit for someone's career and life, but having played a small part in that in terms of setting them in a direction, I think, again, that's something that I can certainly look back with pride of saying, okay, well, it's great that they've gone on to do great things. And like I say, like you're helping them along that journey. And I think that's a big positive that you can see. That's something that, again, it's not just how do you build a company that generates X amount of revenue and profit. There's much more to it in terms of like the purpose of why you're doing that. And some of it can't be measured. Some people will thank you immensely, but maybe you don't even know about it. And
Yeah.
and yeah, you might find out several years later. You might not find out at all. But yeah, I think that's
That's it, man.
Yeah, so, I mean, the image that just came on the screen is definitely a great question that we have towards the end, which is if you could start over again, or if there's someone that's getting started right now, like what advice would you give them? But how would you have done things differently, or like what would you say to that person that is on the early stages of that Dunning-Kruger chart, which I feel like we'd probably all love to be back there in some ways.
Go backwards, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. I don't know whether I'd change much about my journey because it was our journey and it's got us to the point we're at here. And there were some key moments that were learning moments along the way. And, you know, although I'd like revenue to be higher for almost all of that journey, of course, like the actual journey, I think on the whole, I've really enjoyed it and the successes we've achieved and things. What I'd say to anyone else kind of looking to set up an agency is that I don't know whether things have changed, but I feel like to be an agency owner takes a certain kind of person, and I don't think it's for everyone. And I've just realized you need a hell of a lot of determination, a lot of grit, the fight, and what was something else I was going to add to this, and a really thick skin.
Yeah.
Because the amount of complaints that come your way from clients, from your team, everything, and the amount you have to overcome, and you know, to the point where some weeks or months you don't want to open your email, you know, like, and you're like, this isn't good. But then you're trying to balance it out with all the positive things that happen too. But I wouldn't say it's right for everybody, and I just think really carefully about it first. And if you are going to do it, know exactly what you can bring. You know, if there's something unique there, then that's great, because I think that makes a hell of a difference these days.
Yeah, I think it does. And I think being able to filter what information you take in or not,
Yeah.
because you're right, you might get lots of complaints and let's say 50% are valid, 50% are not. I think being able to differentiate between that and not end up chasing and wasting your time on stuff where it's like, okay, well, they have a different view to me. That's fine. They're welcome to have a different view, but that's not the way I'm doing things, and that's not why I'm doing it. And then you still have that single-mindedness to carry on, but equally not to the point where you refuse very useful and helpful constructive feedback that could help you to improve. So you need to be able to listen, take things on board and improve, but also I think you're right, you need a thick skin. Sometimes stuff will happen. Sometimes people will say things you completely disagree with, and you've just got to be able to get on with it. And yeah, let it like that whole water off a duck's back sort of thing of like, you need to have that thick skin to be able to say, okay, well, fine, that's your opinion. I'm carrying on anyway.
Yeah, like 99% of what you're doing is right, so just keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't always win. It's impossible. Certainly over a long period of time and multiple people, multiple clients. There's if you can overall come out on top, you're doing pretty well. Harry, what advice would you give to people in terms of whether it's doing things differently or not, or just kind of like what advice you'd give to people who are getting started now?
Yeah, just really evaluate why you're starting an agency. If you think you're starting an agency because you can make hella money, dude, go be a like key employee somewhere. Like, go bring in sales, go do that kind of stuff. You probably, you know, be happier and make probably more money than. I mean, we're talking to the three of us, you know, without tooting our own horns, like examples of successful agencies, and you can hear us talking about the struggles of being a successful agency. Imagine the 98% of agencies that are not successful. And yeah, I think the biggest thing, I mean, I would, if you know someone approached me and they're like, I want to start an agency because I think I'm going to earn a lot of money, I would immediately go, they're not going to last like 2 years. They're done. So you really got to think about what you're going to bring to the table. Is it a killer service? if you start an agency, I mean, this is another one. People that think like this classic, this is a very big Dunning-Kruger thing. A lot of people start agencies because they're like, well, I'm going to start a good agency. Like all these other agencies are bad, but I'm going to start a good agency. No one sets out, yes, of course there's bad agencies, but no one sets out to start a bad agency. No one woke up one day and's like, I'm going to do a really shit job for my clients and I don't care about my stuff. Nobody, that didn't happen. That's what happened to the business because it came out of control or it unraveled or all these things. So that's the journey you're embarking on. We all had amazing intentions when we started, and we all still have amazing intentions. It's hard to tell if, where I'm at the Dunning-Kruger curve. I think it's funny, Kevin, you're like, yeah, now that we're past that kind of Dunning-Kruger, shit, we might still be at the start. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I might look.
There's parts of it where we are at the start. Certainly
For
when you talk about how
sure.
things change with like AI technology and all stuff like that, I definitely feel at the start of that. But
Exactly. So
stuff will change. You're not an expert
exactly
at
right.
100%
So
of everything.
it's just writing that out. I mean, what's the other one? Jane, you said like, we're making most of the right decisions. Like someone told me, it's like if you're right more than 50% of the time, you're beating the stock market. So just realize that you're not always, you might think, and if you ask yourself, how often are you right? I might be like 80% of the time I'm right. But if you actually look at it, probably not, or else you would be mega, mega rich.
Yeah, of course.
So it's just kind of, I think, having the, humility to know when you're maybe not making the best call and then changing that call. But I think we're all, by virtue of being here, pretty good at that.
I think just by sticking around, we're still here. We're still running agencies.
Yeah.
That shows that grit and determination. We've been through peaks and troughs and everything else that's going along. And
Yeah, exactly that.
That really is. So yeah, we're out of time. So I feel like we definitely could be we could double the amount of time, if not triple this, to be honest. But yeah, thanks very much to both of you, Jane and Harry. So yeah, fascinating stories and really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.